Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me Professor G Ramesh. He's not a newcomer to our channel. He has been on our channel several times. His conversations were hosted usually by JK, my colleague. But today he is joining me and we're going to talk about industries, the favorite whipping boy of India, and why this happened, and there is a big history behind it. We're going to touch upon all that stuff, but more importantly, for an aspirational India, what is the way forward? Professor G Ramesh was Professor of Public Policy, retired at IIM Bangalore, and let's now welcome Ramesh ji. But before that, please like this video. Ramesh ji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaste, Sri. Namaste, Sri. I mean, nice to join you. I mean, we missed meeting in India when you were here. And on the book launch also, I was not in Bangalore. Otherwise, I would have joined that day.
Thank you, sir. That book launch, we did not expect the crowd that turned up, sir. Many people had to watch it from outside. Very, very sad, but you never know. Sometimes you get the estimation wrong. But thank you so much for your, ringing applause, ringing endorsement of what I do and what P Gurus does. Professor Ramesh, I remember in the 60s, there were movies made about how capitalists are ruining the country. I mean, there was this raging Garibi Hatao was not a phrase that she coined after. I mean, it was a phrase that was coined after the fact. People were talking about this, like, nobody should do any work. Any capitalist is really trying to squeeze work out of you. Movies after movies, the entire socialism used to rage in India. I remember one of the reasons why I left to study abroad was that in the 80s, I felt that it was getting stifling. So why this thing is continuing to linger even after 30 years of reforms that were initiated during P.V. Narasimha Rao's regime? And why is it that even today, if Congress wants to take pot shot, the first culprit is the industrialists?
Yeah, thank you, Sri. I mean, I'll also take a little bit history about the US, what happened, because that's where we draw the inspiration from. And they were also sort of, giving a protection to the private sector and like that. But you are right, 1956, do you remember that socialistic pattern of society and then nationalization, then the private sector became a bad word. And before that, at the time of independence, most of it were actually in private sector. Most of this, all the sectors are actually in private sector. And it all happened in a span of 10 to 15 years post independence and like that, the nationalization and then the socialistic pattern and like that. Before that, recently one book came by Nicholas Wapshott, 2020, I think. He wrote like Samuelson Friedman, as if Samuelson is first name or something like that. Okay, the book title is. And that was about the running feud there in US, between the fiscal economist and then the monetary economist. And then the free market people, and I wouldn't say free market vis-a-vis the socialists, but more like regulated free market, and then support, and then interventionist free market, you can say, where they felt that market cannot be entirely left to its own and it required intervention. In fact, there is one sociologist who said that market has never been left free in the history of the markets. So that's the track record also, incidentally. Then came the, crony capitalism in 1980. In fact, crony capitalism actually was made on the example of Imelda and Philippines and like that. Sadly, they used that framework to actually fit the capitalism, okay, which is rather really running them down. If you really ask me, capitalism is not that bad as what the Philippines government had and like that, crony capitalism. Then came, in 2014 or something like that, I think, book by Raghuram Rajan and Zingales on free capitalism from capitalist. I would have said free economics from economist. That's what I would is really saying that, if you really see. And that was again about, yeah, we do need capitalism, but we need society's oversight and control and things like that. And they have made certain suggestions which would read like some election manifesto. How you should you should support the poor, how we should support the new industries and things like against the incumbents and like that. So that itself, it has been getting diluted. And one of my hypotheses is that, in fact, I'm writing a paper on this, After the coming down of the communism and then the breaking of USSR, probably there is nothing to really confront. Okay, so capitalism also lost the steam after that. And I mean, I was going through an article by Paul Krugman recently. I mean, he has in fact reviewed this book by Webshot, and he said that Biden economic policy is tending towards social justice. I mean, I don't want to say it loud because it's an IPR of the Dravidian party, social justice, social justice. They keep saying, I don't know where Paul Krugman picked it up actually. Okay. And now you come to India. Okay. Now, I don't know, Sri, I think people like us of our vintage, we really miss Rajaji and Masani type of people who are not only free market people, but free thinkers also. Okay. I mean, there is sort of at that point to think unconstrained, and on the face of Nehruism, and then the sort of socialistic pattern of society and nationalization like that, is really indeed being like a heretic. That stage was very tough to really speak of free markets and like that. But they did speak for that, and then came the Swatantra Party. In fact, recently, saw a couple of articles saying we miss Swatantra Party. Okay. In fact, one of the proponent is actually Ramachandra Guha, which makes me actually suspect also, would suspect the whole intention also. Okay, why would they want, you and I want, but why would they want Swatantra Party now and like that? Okay. Then what happened? Of course, reforms happened. Sad part is now there's a total lack of any ism or ideology. In fact, in America, they call it managerialism. That is, which anything that works is fine. That's really the ideology that really works. And in India, sad part is that the dialogues are like Suit Boot Sarkar. I mean, what is this Suit Boot Sarkar? It's not a philosophy or an ideology or something. Of course, there is Swadeshi Jagran types who have some narration to really speak about and like that. But reality is today is really bereft of any ideological thinking like that. And if you remember, I mean, even Navin Panagiri and all were part of this narration. Bihar model versus Modi model and all, you remember, I mean, and that was growth model, probably vis-a-vis development model, or, I mean, that sort of thing was also happening. So in this context, then industry has become really a whipping boy, and it doesn't really have a voice. I mean, people should understand where is the GST coming from, where are the taxes coming from, which goes into the subsidies. Today we talk of subsidies as as if a political philosophy or economic theory, and people are trying to really justify. But there's also other angle that where's the money coming from, and how do you manage without the industries? Okay, and they have been really contributing significantly, and they are now global players. I mean, they are really proved themselves. It's not like they have failed the economy or something like that. Where the growth rates are coming, and look at all the expansion infrastructure, industries, manufacturing, services, and all that. So I think there's a good space there, niche. In fact, you can become probably the proponent for the free market, and then for the industrialists and private sector and like that. In fact, in 2014, this government actually started. Sorry, 1 minute. I'll finish this point.
Yeah.
Speaking for the industries, but suddenly even this government has become weak-kneed. I mean, probably it will. The PM may think twice before really taking some 10 economists on his global visit when he makes. But all US presidents do that, all prime ministers do that globally, isn't it? Yeah, sorry. It was a long
Yes.
range. I'm sorry.
No worries, sir. I had one question. Some of our viewers are very young, and I want to kind of I want you to walk us through the history as to what Indira Gandhi did. Now, she was a selected prime minister according to my book. In my book,
Correct.
People can disagree with me. She was a selected prime minister. Who selected her? You have to go back and you can have to connect some dots. You will know what it is. But the most important thing was, in order to assert herself in the Congress party, she actually split it in 69. And the split, I believe, happened because of her decision to nationalize banks over the objections of the then finance and deputy prime minister Morarji Desai.
Yeah.
And when this happened, this was appealed in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court struck it down. And she went back and amended the law to override the Supreme Court. Now, that is one thread going. The other thread is privy purse was abolished in before the 1971 elections, presumably because it was the single biggest donor to the Swatantra Party. How true
Yeah.
are these 2 points, sir?
Yeah. So to begin with, Indira Gandhi, before that, of course, LIC had been nationalized much before, and insurance were nationalized, and this was only the natural picking banks, And as you said, syndicate. Do you remember that?
Yes,
Syndicate. They used to call Kamaraj,
syndicate. Yeah,
Nijalingappa, and all those people. Okay, and she wanted to slide them. And it's not like, at least Nehru might have had some ideological, probably preferences, like because USSR was coming up and like that. Hers was totally reactionary, like how to really handle, confront this group, syndicate group. For that, she found a populistic measure like bank nationalization, and that came in very handy. And that did pay for her, because you remember Pujari days, in the loan
yes,
mela days and all. So he followed it up with massive populistic scheme of loan melas. Okay, that again made her very popular. It's not like our Jandan of these days, or all the banking system that we are talking about, inclusive banking and all that. That time it was just simple frittering away, of the bank resources and like that. So that made her popular, and that did help her to win the election. I mean, and then sideline all the old guards, or you can call them as the old guards of the Congress, and then continued up to, then it ended in the 1975, when again the history turned. And probably Rajiv was someone, who first started with automation company. Some liberalization is started, but Narasimha was the first person to really reverse that trend, 1991, with Manmohan Singh as the FM and like that. So it's indeed true that, I mean, she did found all these things populistic. And that time it looked like, these are irreversible. That time, if you are born, or if you are like, college students like that, which I was, I would have thought that these are all irreversible. It will never happen that Air India will get privatized, okay, or some of the, the sort of privatization that you see today, like airports being owned by private sector and like that. So I think that happened during Vajpayee time and like that, subsequently. So these are really a big development after, Indira Gandhi's attempts and like that. The private purse, yeah, they had a grudge against them, and they were also one of the supporters of Swatantra Party, of course. So it was talked those days that probably that was also one of the reasons, why it abolished. But also it also helped her. It paid her actually politically. So she again showed that, listen, I really abolished the, princes and kings, sources of income, and now everybody is equal. So it all, I mean, into that Garibi Hatao and all those schemes, it fitted her like that. So she played it beautifully. That's all I can say, in a very synchronous way like that, to help herself. I mean,
so see, at least Nehru did not, touch other than insurance. He didn't nationalize things.
yeah,
The only good thing that came out of nationalization of banks was that you started seeing banks even in remote, poorly served areas. If it was private, they probably would not have opened a branch there. Fair enough. That is the one good thing about nationalization. But the downside is the loan melas, the
yeah,
non-performing assets, and that has been going on. And then the UPA made it into a fine art. They,
yeah,
they they were doling out money by the thousands of crores, and most of it was actually kicked back to them. Videocon's 40,000 crore loan is one example. That's one place where one CEO got caught, whereas that too for 300 crores, whereas the remaining 39,700 crores is still not probed. My point to make all this is that NPAs became a fine art because the government could control the banks. I mean, you had the situation where the finance minister calls up the State Bank of India chief or the LIC chief and says, buy this share, only
true.
because he needed a counterparty for something that was being propped up by participatory notes using some,
Right.
high net worth individuals.
Yeah,
So while they were saying Manrega, they were trying to deploy Manrega, socialism, blah blah blah, no poor left behind. They were also enriching themselves in a big way. Now the thing is, today in the Modi regime, he has not been able to get rid of Manrega. Now after COVID, he has started giving free rice and wheat and things like that. I'm not sure that can be weaned off of the public. In India, any freebie, once you start it, you cannot stop it. Where do you see the Modi government? Do you think they will continue the socialist path? Because it's actually it's a burden on the exchequer and it's a burden on the taxpayer.
Yeah, sure. So if you look, I mean, just one small point about the Nehru's, I mean, didn't nationalize and things like that. He didn't nationalize, but if you look at the industrial policy of 1956, I think it reserved everything for the public sector. Okay, private sector only by default they could do something. Okay, so all the PSUs came during that time. Of course, IITs and IIMs also came that time, which is what now the Congress is claiming. That's why ISRO is successful like that. Okay. Now, if you look at what the Indira Gandhi has achieved through the loan mela, is that they have sort of institutionalized this, and they have made it probably what should have been transactional into entitlement. So now people see all these things as an entitlement. They see even loan as an entitlement. Okay, like the way you would see water and healthcare and education like that. Which is rather sad. I mean, even subsidy, even monthly, cash, these are all seen as entitlement now. That's what you mean when you say that now these are irreversible and this has become part of the policies, and nobody can remove it. So that's a sort of the tragic thing that has happened in the sense, whereas everything should be economically weighed upon, okay, and then look at the time and is it still really valid? For example, again, the way we were doing the privatization, okay. So this is something sad. The Modi government did prune it. I mean, of course, it has curbed a lot the leakages. I know for sure, Sri, that one bullet payment from Ministry of Rural Development, it goes directly to the beneficiary today. Okay, there are no intermediaries. It goes to his bank account. And then, whereas earlier it will go through several channels. Remember, and what Rajiv Gandhi said about how much really it reaches and like that. Today, I would say that 100% really reaches them. After that, if they pay anything, that's really their problem. Okay. But government ensures the beneficiaries get it. So that way, it's a marked improvement from 2014, one can say, thanks to technology. And thanks to the way this Modi government leveraged, Aadhaar and UPI and then Jandan and things like that. Okay. But Modi government also, on the face of there's so much of freebie being thrown upon everywhere, and if you are going to also lose elections like this, okay, marginally or by, impressive margins, then you will also be shaken up. I mean, so Modi has to really now build a strong narrative to counter that. Now, how is he going to take to the people saying that these are not in your own interest? These are all in the long term, really suicidal, and it can hurt yourself. Nobody can really sustain. Karnataka government, for example, is struggling for funds for, that this one, I mean, for the development activities and constructions and like that. And this is again, what would you call it? I mean, that is crony capitalism, okay, with private sector. This is what would you call it? I mean, freebie culture. That's what you say, revdi culture. If that is crony capitalism, this is a revdi culture, isn't it? So you and me, the middle class, is now torn between these two. I don't know whom to side with now. you know.
But let's take a step forward. Let us say that the Modi government comes back in
Yeah,
2024. Do you see them shifting away from this to more fiscally responsible states? Today, the states are routinely borrowing money from the RBI.
correct.
And if the RBI stops giving them that money, what's going to happen? Already a couple of states have declared, can be deemed bankrupt. Punjab, for example,
Yeah,
there is no way they can pay. They can't even pay the interest, leave alone the principal.
not at
So
all.
at this point of time in 2024, let us pray that Modi comes back. What does he need to do? Two or three things that will set right this thing. Otherwise, India will also become another Venezuela or Pakistan.
Definitely. See, what is happening is that the problem lies with the state government these days. Okay, central government,
Yes.
lot of discipline has come. Post COVID, yes, our deficit financing share and all went up, but that's also by design, and that's also coming down. But even where PTR kept boasting, he did control. But I mean, now Tamil Nadu is the maximum borrower in India and like that. Okay, so at state level, as such, there is no control because water is being mobilized, goes as subsidy and then salaries. Okay, if you look at salaries, interest and subsidy. These three alone, Sri, can be anywhere from 80 to 90% to 100% today. Okay. And now, what will be the victim tomorrow? I mean, interest payment could be the victim tomorrow. Then the ratings could suffer. Okay. It will be really like a debt trap the states are leading to some other state. I think sometime I would like to have separate discussion on this, the state finances. Okay, because now the discipline lies with the state government. Of course, one good thing is fiscal responsibility is still being administered and there is some accountability there. Okay. And I would say that even all these states can borrow more also, but not for subsidies and paying salaries. It has to be really for development activities and like that. Okay. So one thing Modi government can do, but they have not been able to do. I've been involved with JNURM right from UPA days and like that. They gave, let's say, 55,000 crore to all the municipal corporations like that. But they have not been able to instill any accounting discipline, even forget fiscal discipline. There is no even accounting discipline in the in the ULBs. And that almost continues today also. I'm also in some smart cities and advise them and things like that. First, get the accounting straight, of the municipalities. Okay. Then you can talk about, fiscal discipline and like that. And I think it has to be a consensus. Modi has to become more consensus government next term and talk to the opposition-led state governments, sensitize them about about how these are really indefensible, the way they have been giving different subsidies. Of course, most of it is also getting distributed from central government, okay, because thanks to the finance commission recommendations like that. But UPA government also, MDA government also, somehow they are not able to leverage the central distribution of funds to bring in some discipline among the states in the finances. Somehow they see it as a, what you can say, sovereign right of the state to spend itself. But somehow the central also has to impose certain disciplines. So it has to focus more on the state reform in the next government, I would say, when it comes back. And for that, it has to win state governments also. Okay, that I leave it to you. You and I can pay for that probably.
Very true. So this is one part. The other
Yeah.
part is in terms of privatization, they tried to take LIC public, for example,
Right.
and when I looked at lifted the carpet and looked underneath, I was a little scared because I know from anecdotal evidence that it was holding a lot of worthless stock. And if
Yeah.
there is a calamity, I'm not even sure LIC can pay the insurance premiums. Let's say there's a massive earthquake and 100,000 people die. I'm talking about something like that. So, in order to get more things to be more efficient, the Modi government needs to privatize. They tried with LIC and then they pulled back because there wasn't much interest. And India also
Right.
still doesn't really allow FDIs and FIIs to come in. There's always that fear of East India Company phenomenon happening again. So there are
Right.
some contradictions inside. How can the Modi government see their way clear through this to take India down a path where it will be able to sustain development and also research? See, being a lower cost producer can only work for some time. After
Right.
that, somebody even lower than us will come in and then they'll take that business, right? Because you have to add value. This outsourcing, it doesn't add value. You're just doing, it's
Sure.
like menial labor.
So
Over to
if
you,
you
sir.
take LIC privatization and like that, we were expecting that this government will go really aggressively on that. I mean, let me point out one thing. When the Thatcher government was privatizing in UK, even they found, mind you, the London market I'm talking, that it couldn't absorb so much of the volume of the stocks. Suddenly so many PSUs coming because each of these PSUs are monolith. Okay. So even our capital market could not have absorbed if really LIC had really offloaded more than that. It can do only in stages. Okay. Now this LIC is, I mean, we should not talk about bigger can panic actually, because there's a lot of greening that happens in the accounts probably the way we were
Yes.
doing it in bank accounts and like that. Okay. But people say that it also had a lot of old stocks for which the values could be still ruling the day like that. So that way they could be still salvaged, the insurance. But one advice I would like to give it to the BJP government if it comes back is that it itself needs some self-discipline, okay, in managing the banks and LICs and other corporations. It fairly follows, hands off and remote and like that. Probably it has to distance itself even more and make those boards even more professional, and that will be one step before you sort of little more and more privatize these entities and like that. Another thing that can happen to post 2024 is that says that two three banks may get privatized, okay, so they are only wondering about which bank and which, not which bank and like that. So we have to see what they may do on that, okay. So that is something that I'm expecting the next government to do. What is the other question? One of the privatization, I mean.
The other question, I'm also drawing a blank here. The main thing is that the government needs to privatize. At the same time, it also needs to be able to not be able to spend for research. India is
Correct.
today, we are very happy that FII or FDI investment is coming in, but that investment is coming in as a lower cost producer. And
Correct.
this will only give you for some time, because an even lower cost producer will come behind you and take that business away. India needs to go up the value chain in terms of technology,
Yeah.
and I
I
don't see
think
the environment for that.
a lot of things are happening in that. I'm glad to say, I myself in some of the incubation centers of one IT, couple of SCPIs and like that. And also, see, again, you look at it how the government works. Okay, this is again, I would blame the bureaucracy. And sometimes, I think we should discuss this bureaucratic reform. Okay, post 2024. Okay,
Yes, yes.
they created this $1 billion for AI and $1 billion for, I think, quantum computing and things like that. I wonder if they would have spent even $10 million or something like that so far. Okay, so why aren't they getting proposals, or don't I mean they don't have still mechanisms to disburse, or I don't know where is it being held up. Okay, so what I would say is that a lot of IPRs are happening now. IPR regimes have really improved, and people have got now an aptitude. I mean, I would say hunger to really make their products into intellectual properties and things like that, which is again one step for the R&D. But I think the corporates, it has to get into their DNA to really do the R&D, and that there have been always tax supports for that. I mean, and they need to engage with government to really see, I mean, corporates to see how to make them invest on R&Ds and like that. Yeah, the last point you were asking last time was that, so what's happening is FDI is not happening because the private sector and suspicion about foreign capital and like that, and so they call it, like, in population we used to call it controlled expansion. Okay, now investment also, whether you can really talk about controlled expansion, where you can really decide where you want and where you don't want. But there are certain very good indicators, if you ask me. See, for example, a lot of investments are happening in the capital goods, like, especially manufacturing, like defense, for example. We will be net exporter from being a big net importer globally, okay, which is really a big transformation, I would say. And also it's happening in the railways, okay, like a lot of metros getting manufactured, and we are one of the biggest procurer like that. It will also happen in the airplane industry, so that we now at least get into, MRO, for example, MRO industry, and maybe later into manufacturing airport components and things like that, which is again defense components. Okay, so a lot of these high-end capital goods is happening. Okay, in fact, I'll pose a challenge. Okay, the services industry is one which has really moved the value chain. It has, in fact, indeed enjoyed so much for so long, and manufacture we never supported, mind you, Sri, but now it's really coming up. Like those in the, they are all coming up with, complex defense manufacturing like that, including ISRO space satellites and like that. What is the service industry doing? It was enjoying all the, capital appreciation and then share market, and all those things, and tax subsidies and like that. Did it move the value chain? Don't you think that the software industry should do a self-reflection, and IT/BT industry should do a self-reflection, moving from contract manufacturing and contract servicing to really being a lead service guy and lead R&D guy, isn't it?
Professor Ramesh, this is the problem with Indian software companies, and
Yeah.
I may be stereotyping here, and viewers, please feel free to put in comments as to why what I am saying now is not true. See, what Infosys tried to do, I believe, to try and create a product in parallel with doing consulting services. Now, what happens is, in this, you have to be very careful to pick the sector where you are going to productize. Because if you do it in the same sector where you are providing consulting services to a customer, the customer is not going to like the fact that you are going to come up with a product that is going to compete with his own product. And then he will also accuse you, saying that you learned at my expense and now you are competing with me. I mean, this is what we are always blaming China now, right? They don't have any respect for intellectual property and so on and so forth. So this experiment, they tried it, and I think that did not come. And again, they have gone back to the old method of just being a lower cost labor services provider. The problem is now the mindset of the people is they come to work, they get better than market salaries, they get a few foreign jaunts here and there, and they seem to be happy with that. Unfortunately, the culture of startup is still not really taking root in India. And the reason for that is that many startups tried in, I think, 10, 15 years ago to come in, and they got messed up big time. In terms of, like, when they made some money, let us say the startup is based in US, it's got an India wing, and then it made some money. And then there used to be, like, taxation was through the roof. I mean, it's out of, one guy told me that because he had 4 startups, and in one startup, the ED was forcing him to pay so much money that he said he almost closed down the other 3 also, because he said, I just couldn't take the pain that these guys are imposing on me. So there is this tax terrorism kind of thing that exists even today. And I have personal experience. I'm not going to do it again today. Many of the viewers know what I have gone through with this. The thing is, somewhere you have to give a special category where these people will bring you that high-end technology product, and in return for that, you allow them to repatriate their profits. India has a buffer now, $650 billion of foreign exchange buffer. It can afford to let somebody, hey, he comes in and brings in 100 million investment, and off of that, he's making 30 million profit. Let him take it out. What's wrong in that? So there is this hesitation. So in other words, even when India wants to give something, it is not giving open-handed. It is giving closed. This mindset needs to change. I don't know where that has to start.
Actually, incidentally, it's a positive trend, Sri. Earlier, we used to be talking about repatriation from other countries to India. Okay, now we are really talking repatriation from India to other countries, which is a positive sign. There are certain positive things happening in the sense that there are a lot of startups are doing more R&D probably than the big companies, I would say, Sri.
That's where it starts always, sir. That's where it starts. Yes.
Yeah. So that way, these IITs and other IICs and all have to fire up in a big way, and then they have to really, reflect how to do that. Okay, and STPIs also. So that way, that's not happening. But one advice I mentor startups and like that, I give it to them is stay away from government. Okay, they will say that I'm giving this subsidy for IT, this subsidy for BT, make in India, start. All those things could be happening. But still, I tell them, no, fight it out in the market always. Don't depend on these things if you're in R&D and startup and entrepreneurship venture and like that. So I, in fact, discourage them from that culture. That's also another freebie culture in the startup.
Yes.
So I sort of discourage them, and they always benefited. Otherwise, they use tremendous time following up with the government. Okay. So in that time, they could have really done some development of their own company and like that, rather than following the government and like that, So that's still not happening. So I would say that a lot of these developments are actually happening outside the government. There is something enigmatic about government, Sri. I mean, suppose, let's say tomorrow government comes up with even a $1 billion investment for startup. It will get bogged down into problem. Okay, there's something when private sector is doing it, it will not give it to 10 VC guys, tell them, I will give you $1 billion and you invest and you just give the return. That trust they will never have. They say that I will do it, and they'll botch it up also. Okay. So some of these trust factors, and then some of these, they have to come out of that thinking that how far you are willing to go. You have to go the whole way. If you want really make it up, you have to go the whole way, and then it can happen. But what I would like to tell you is that, you'll be surprised, a lot of startups are happening outside IIMs and IITs. Okay. I got a hypothesis for that. My hypothesis is that, their compensation is so good. We are, hiked up the stakes so much, they are not willing to venture out. Whereas the other guys are willing to venture out because their stakes are not so high, the opportunity cost. Okay. And they are willing to invest some small amount and then try their stakes like that. And they have come up very well, some of them. Okay. So recently I tweeted also saying that now the tagline is, "He's a unicorn, but not from IIT. He's a unicorn, but not from IIM." Like that. No, that's the way that seemed to be the selling point these days, to sell a unicorn like that. Okay. So there's a whole ecosystem which is coming. But as far as the tax reforms and regime, I interact with them closely. So you maybe give them another couple of years time, 2 3 years time, there'll be drastic changes actually. Okay, compared, you remember when we were all in 80s 90s, when you walk through an airport, how much harassment you used to be put through, and
Oh,
now you
yes.
really, you walk like a breeze these days in the airport, isn't it? So
Yes,
same
yes.
thing may happen in the filings also. And hopefully a lot of these are all fixable problem, and a lot of problems are getting fixed, and like faceless transactions, faceless settlement, and things like that. All those things probably resolve. But if you get stuck in the system, I say it's like the conveyor belt. If your luggage gets stuck in the conveyor belt, you will keep on searching in the conveyor belt for your luggage.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Wonderful exposition of thought here.
Thank
We
you.
have a few questions. If you don't mind,
Yeah,
we can
please.
have those answered.
Yeah.
First question, please. Trey Jones wants to know, Professor Ramesh, are there any economic theories that improve on Keynesian slash Adam Smith models that were propounded over a century ago?
Yeah, in fact, even in this book, Wapshot, which I mentioned, and then subsequently, Paul Krugman has written an article on that. He's saying rather than seeing Samuelson versus Friedman, you should see James Tobin versus Friedman. So there is all this free market vis-a-vis the regulated market or the socialistic markets and like that. So that the next stage of theories you can say, but I wouldn't credit crony capitalism and all like theories and like that. So there is a monetary policy, fiscal policy, free markets, regulated markets, and like that. You know, the later ones are all probably I wouldn't classify as theories. And that's why it is. And
Next
maybe
question, please.
communism versus capitalism. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. Why the GDP of the UPA?
Why the GDP of UPA era is considered to be the best? How and why? Even though as a citizen I can feel the quality of life has improved, but the data shows otherwise. What is the trick in it?
Yeah,
Good
the
question, Kala.
GDP,
Yeah.
the GDP was higher, and one they had couple of bad luck. The NDA, one is the COVID they had, and that really affected 4 to 6 quarters or like that. And they also had this demonetization which impacted for 2 quarters and like that. But generally, I would like to pose a question, Sri, to your viewers. Suppose I give an option. I'll give the option that you can have a GDP of 10%, but with crony capitalism or a lot of corruption, or let's say 6 to 7% of GDP growth rate, but probably with minimal crony capitalism and corruption. Which one would the viewers prefer? Okay, so that time you had a great growth, you had a lot of good feeling, but all the consequences were faced by the NDA government. Okay, all the budget deficits, okay, NPAs, and then all the projects that went for a toss, all the coal projects and then power projects, they had to subsequently face it, isn't it? So that was maybe when you call green GDP, it probably is like greening of the GDP also. Okay, you keep greening the GDP. you know,
Next question,
yeah.
please. Peter Vaz wants to know, do we talk about the super wealthy manipulating stocks, defrauding banks by not paying the loan, etc.? Do they consider this their entitlement, or is it fraud? Easy to point a finger at the poor and the middle class and make them a scapegoat.
No, I don't know if they mean lending against stocks or something. Our banks are highly controlled, so I don't think we have problem from that angle. We may not have, but the NPA is a different reason. Not from people trying to, you know, frauding the bank system through stocks and pledging the stocks and like that. For example, of course, it did impact. Adani would have given the stocks as collateral possibly, but not the primary collateral. Okay, and it took a big hit, isn't it? So that might have hit the stocks of the banks also, for example, which might have lent. But I think slowly limping back, that impact got controlled. But RBI, even during the peak of the prime meltdown time, it did control. I mean, thanks to people like YV Reddy and all of them. So we are not so much exposed to this aspect. I mean, let's not. I mean, give you a name fraud, and like that. Sometimes there is a greed. I don't know. Would you call greed a fraud? I don't know. I mean, even Greenspan said, probably I underestimated the greed. He didn't say I underestimated the fraud. I mean. Yeah, Morgan Stanley is about positive. Yeah, it is positive, and these are all, mind you, these are global agencies, these are independent agencies, and nobody can say that Modi government like that. And so probably when people are appreciating, let's take it. Why should we suspect when somebody appreciates also? We take the criticism seriously, but we don't take appreciation seriously. I don't know why. you know, we take it a lot of cynicism. Yeah, am I audible? I mean, yeah. What about oil bond policy of UPS? Was it good one or bound the country as people as debt payer? Yeah, that time it was required, and fortunately we could really come out of that. Okay, some of these things, it's also a question of, I keep saying, the very nature of borrowing is that you pass it on to the next generation. So really, you have to talk about intergenerational equity, and then it gets into another area like that. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the last question, sir.
As
Deepak Bhatt.
intergenerational, I should also talk about intergovernment, like the previous government pass it on to the next government, the burden.
Yes, indeed. So this is the last question. Deepak Bhatt
Yeah.
wants to know, how can we prevent foreign countries from picking away good startups? My friend working on AI/machine learning, MRI technology was approached by people from US Embassy to set up company in the US.
Yeah. So they will approach, and they will approach. And I'll give one good example, and this is also a recommendation to the government. I was mentoring one chip designer and startup. So all the funders were willing to give. We even approached Singapore, Hong Kong, and US. They said, we'll fund you if only you are located in Hong Kong or Taiwan or US, like that. So somewhere the destination matters. And I keep telling government that you have to really market India as the destination for investment and destination for technology, and not just as ease of doing, and then tax policies and like that. You have to really promote it as a destination, just as Modi government promoted Gujarat as Gujarat destination for Gujarat tourism. Okay, so there's a whole lot of things involved in that. It's not like you cannot ban, isn't it? Unlike onion export or right export, you cannot ban startup export. Okay, so it will happen,
Yes,
and we
indeed.
need to be
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
we need to be competitive. I mean, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Professor
Thanks a
Ramesh,
lot.
and it was a wonderful conversation. A great way to start the day for many of our viewers, and I have no doubt in my mind that we are going to have more such conversations. Sir, you have to pardon my ignorance. Sometimes I may ask you questions that appear to be silly, but I'm the spokesperson for the lay person who may not be completely familiar with the technology. So sometimes these questions have a way of appearing a little dumb, but please bear with me on that. And it was wonderful, sir. I can tell you it's a great conversation. We'll be back again, viewers. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.
Thanks a lot, Sri. Look forward to it. I use your channel mainly to clarify, and give people more clarity so that then they can decide themselves rather than prejudicing or opinionating them and like that. Yeah.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
very
Thank you,
learned
sir. That is our
audience.
goal.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
See
you.
you.